Hi, I'm Dr. Robyn Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. Do you find it triggering and scary to talk to your kids about their emotions? That's a trauma response. Here's why. If you like this content, please click subscribe below so you can be notified about new episodes. And please check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us at Dr. Koslowitz Psychology. You can also find the post-traumatic parenting podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So many post-traumatic parents have a hard time talking with our children about their emotions because trauma creates a sense of alexithymia, which means we have a hard time identifying and relating to our emotions. So sometimes when someone is severely traumatized, they will come into the office of a clinical psychologist like me, and I'll say, how did you feel when that happened? And the person will be like, I don't know, I didn't have feelings. And very often it's something like, I was in a car accident, someone I know very well died, I just got devastating news about my job or about my health, I just got divorced, right? Things that should be devastating, that most people would rate a 9 or a 10 on a distress scale. If I said, how bad is that from 0 to 10? Most people would say that's like a 10. I get this perplexed, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking what I need to do next, right? So trauma creates this sense where we focus so much on survival because the trauma app in the back of our brains that's created when we're traumatized laser focuses our attention on surviving. What's a problem? What do I need to solve? How do I fix it? What do I need to do to stay alive? It doesn't really have the luxury when we're in survival mode to think like, am I more sad about that or am I more worried about that? Kind of having a bittersweet sensation right now, where on the one hand, I'm happy about parts of this, but on the other hand, I'm sad about other parts. We don't have time for that in survival mode, right? If the fire alarm started ringing in this office right now, I would not be thinking about the exact, vibrations of sound that it is. I would just run out, right? I would not be thinking, am I more nervous now about this or am I more angry that someone's had a fire? I wouldn't be thinking that way. I would just be in flight mode, right? In that classic 3F response of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Those are like my options when the fire alarm rings. I'm either going to be like grabbing a fire extinguisher and fighting the fire, or I'm going to be running for my life, but I'm not going to be like contemplating nuances of my emotional experience. So when we are raised in an environment that is very stressful, very chaotic, where there's not a lot of room for anything but survival, we don't learn a lot about the nuances of our emotions. If you see the emotions behind me from inside out, you see fear and anger and joy and sadness and disgust. We don't have time to start analyzing those emotions. We don't have time to think about, what am I feeling right now? Because all we're thinking about is survive. We're in a constant state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We're never in a state of like, let me contemplate this. How do I feel about this? So then when we're adults and our kids come to us with emotions and we want to talk to our kids about their emotions, what happens is we don't know how. It's like talking to somebody who's never tasted a flavor about that flavor. How can I describe pizza to somebody who's only ever eaten bread and water, right? It's meaningless, right? So how do we handle that? So the first thing we have to do is create a vocabulary of emotions for ourselves. So let's understand the function of each emotion. Let's understand what happens when we ignore an emotion, and let's understand how to welcome emotions in. So emotions are messengers. They exist to give us information about the world. Emotions are like another information system other than our brains and our frontal lobes that can give us cognitive information about the world. Our emotions sometimes give us information even faster than our rational thinking can. So the function of fear is to keep us alive, right? Fear tells us about danger. Fear tells us that something's unpredictable and that something bad or scary or life-threatening might happen. So when a child feels a sense of fear, they're afraid of the dark, they're afraid to ride a bike, they're afraid to walk by themselves, they're afraid of a guy in a clown costume, right? that means that the fear in their brain is doing its job of warning them about danger. Our job is not to make fun of them for the fear, right? Oh, that's just a clown. That's silly. He's just a man in a costume. There's nothing to be afraid of. Our job is to say, yeah, man looks kind of creepy. I find clowns creepy, just by the way. So that clown feels, he looks kind of creepy, but it's really a person in a costume. And we can watch a video of someone putting on clown makeup and we can get a sense. But I'm glad that your fear told you to stay away or to come find me, because when somebody gives us a fear response, we should probably find mom or dad, and we should probably find an attachment figure to check back with. So I'm glad that you check back with me and you're telling me that you find him creepy, because that means your fear is trying to protect you. It's doing its job, right? Fear is simply trying to keep you alive. We never shame our children for their fears, even if it's a fear that seems developmentally inappropriate. Like all the other kids are just riding their bike. What's wrong with my kid that he's scared? Scared because he wants to stay alive. It's our job to validate that fear. Yeah, it's scary. It is scary to ride a bike when you had training wheels and now you're riding, and yeah, you might fall and skin your knee and that might hurt. Let's think of what we can do. Let's think of how we can ease you into feeling comfortable. But the job of fear is simply to warn us of danger. So if your child has fears, good job. That means their brain is doing its job. The job of anger is to identify a problem. Anger tells us that something's wrong, that our boundaries were violated in some way, that something isn't fair. And again, we don't have to be afraid of our children's anger. If my daughter accidentally eats my son's ice pop and my son is angry because he wanted his ice pop, yeah, there's a problem. He doesn't have an ice pop anymore and his sister ate it, right? The fact that he's getting angry is not the problem. He's allowed to get angry. Anger identifies a problem. Now, if he acts on his anger in an aggressive manner, if he slaps her or shoves her or calls her a rude name, that we have to discuss, because we can use our words to solve our anger problem. But if a child is angry, the anger in and of itself is not dangerous. The anger simply means there's a problem or a boundary, and we have to discuss that problem or boundary with the child. We can't be afraid of our child's fear or afraid of our child's anger. It's an emotion. We have to have a conversation with them about it and help them understand, what do I do when I'm angry? What do I do when I'm scared? Joy, the function of joy is to say, that was good, do it again. This was a pleasurable experience. I like this. And we need our joy, because our joy is our creativity. It's our motivation. A lot of times, post-traumatic parents feel a strong sense of, I need to keep my kids surviving. I need to keep my kids focused. They have to get into a great college. They have to have a great career. And it's all about, again, that survival, because as post-traumatic parents, we focus on survival. But we don't want to raise an unhappy dentist who went to Harvard, right? We don't want to raise someone who wakes up in their 30s and is like, why am I even in this profession? I have no passion for it. Yeah, I earn good money, but I don't like doing it. I hate going to work every day. We want to raise someone who can tap into their true joy, their true creativity, their true motivation, and have a job that still work, but that feels fulfilling and meaningful, and it's work. Yes, loved work is still work, but it's loved, right? There's a joy there. We want our children to be able to tap into their joy. Play is super important for children. That's how children learn. That's how they practice emotion regulation. Sometimes that's how they practice getting along with other children and sharing resources. There's a lot that children are figuring out through play and through joy experiences. So if we try to minimize that, oh, I don't want my kid to go to a school that has so much recess. What's recess anyway? They need to learn more math. Oh, my child is spending a lot of time first playing when they come home. They should go straight to their homework. What if they don't get into an Ivy League school? Your child needs to tap into their joy so that they don't burn out, so that they have motivation. Joy is also part of the connection they have with us. That love, that shared delight is part of attachment. So we want them to experience joy. And an important part of experiencing joy and experiencing shared joy with our children is playing with them, delighting in their presence, entering that mutual transitional space of play. So joy is super important. It's not just pleasant, it's also our motivation and our wellspring of creativity. Sadness identifies a loss. Sadness also tells us what we value, right? I wouldn't be sad if, I have this wrapper here. If somebody threw this wrapper out, I wouldn't be sad. I already ate whatever it was wrapping. So it's not all that important. But if somebody, threw out, I am writing a book, if somebody threw out a draft of my book, I'd be pretty sad because that book is very important to me, right? So sadness tells us what we value. We are sad when someone dies because we valued the relationship. We will miss them, right? And that sadness tells us what's important to us. Sometimes sadness tells us, I better focus on other relationships. If I lost grandma, I better focus on mom. I better focus on my siblings. I better focus on the relationships I have. Maybe grandma's sister, my aunt is somebody that I need to reach out to and preserve our relationship while I can. So sadness tells us what we value and it identifies a loss. And again, it's okay for our children to be sad because we can't put our children in a position of not feeling negative emotions. More on that later. The last emotion I want to talk about is disgust. Disgust keeps us from being poisoned. So the job of disgust is to have us check in with ourselves and say, do I like this? Not really. So for example, when a child is being like frenemied by her friend, where the friend is like sort of sometimes nice, but sometimes mean, and the kid's not quite sure, is this a friend or is this an enemy? That sense of disgust, like, yeah, I don't want to spend so much time with Sarah. I don't like how I feel when I come home from her house. That disgust, that is a sense that will keep your child from being bullied, that will keep your child from getting into eventually an abusive relationship. Disgust can also become magnified because it's trying to keep us from being poisoned. We sometimes have kids who have disgust around certain tastes or certain textures, and that's a magnified disgust response. Again, we don't want to be like, well, I worked hard to make that, to make that mashed potatoes. I don't care if you don't like the texture. You're going to eat it anyway. It's more like, oh, you don't like this texture. I think disgust in your brain is telling you this is too mushy or too soft. Let's see if we can maybe add something to make it a little firmer. Let's see if we can give it a try. Let's see if there's a way that we can get you into it. Or you know what? You don't have to eat mashed potatoes. I can bake you a potato instead. I can make you steak fries instead. I can take your wishes into account. And also, I don't want you to be afraid of trying something new. So we're going to encourage you to try it in small doses at some point when you want to. The idea is negative emotions are not meant to be a prison. I don't want my child imprisoned by their fear and never trying to ride a bike. I don't want my child imprisoned by their anger response and therefore they don't have any friends because the other kids are like, yeah, I'm staying away from him. I don't want my child demotivated by sadness. I don't want my child, so busy being productive that they forget to engage in joy experiences. I don't want my child so afraid of trying new things that their disgust is ruling their life. I want them to be able to hear the information that the emotion is bringing them, right? I want them to be able to hear it, say, thank you, emotion messenger. You came to tell me something. Like, for example, let's say a child is feeling fear before the first day of school. So I want to say, yeah, the new day of school, the first day of school can be kind of scary. You're meeting new teachers, new classmates. Stuff can go right, but stuff can also go wrong. Yeah, it's kind of scary. Let's plan for that. Maybe we make up a play date the night before with a new kid in the class. Maybe we go to school with a friend that we already know. Maybe we meet the teacher in advance of school. So I want to take fear's message seriously, use it in my planning, and then allow the child to move forward. I'm never going to say there's nothing to be afraid of, right? Because the child's feeling fear. That means the fear in their brain is giving them a message. I want to hear the message because what happens with that messenger is, imagine, there's a messenger with something really important they want to tell you. There's a letter that they must deliver to you. First, they're going to knock on the door. It's going to be like, knock, knock, knock. And you don't answer the door. They're going to knock harder. They're going to start banging on the window. They're going to ring the doorbell. They're going to start trying to get in through the basement. They're going to try to get in through the chimney. The messenger is going to keep on coming because the messenger has a message to deliver. It's so much better to let the messenger in and say, hi, messenger, you have a message for me. So when we validate our child's fear or their anger or their sadness or their disgust, what we're doing is we're showing them that we can let the messenger in. We can hear the messenger's message. We can take it into account and we can also plan for the future. But if that wasn't done for us in our childhood, if no one ever coached us through our emotions, and even more so if we're alexithymic and we don't know our own emotions, so we've never felt fear and said, oh, fear is warning me that something could go wrong. I'm giving a really important workshop tomorrow in a town. What if there's traffic? Thank you, fear. I'll leave an extra half hour earlier just in case. Thank you for warning me about that. You're right. I'm going to take what you're saying into account. If we were never modeled that in our childhood, if we've never learned how to do that, how to relate to our emotions as messengers, then it's going to be very hard to teach that to our children. So it's our job to learn how to do this, to become very literate in the language of emotions, understand our emotions and what they're telling us, so that we can then coach our children through their emotions. If you're a post-traumatic parent and this sounds like this is just something I've never heard before, I don't even know how to do this, then you're in the right place. That's what this YouTube channel is all about. Learning how to give our children the normative childhood experiences that we never experienced, even though we don't have that template in the back of our brains. We don't have that parent that we can copy. Like, what would my mom have done? Maybe we haven't had that kind of parenting. Maybe our childhood was too chaotic or stressed because our parents were busy. In my case, my mom was very busy keeping my very ill father alive, right? So if we didn't have that kind of experiences growing up, of course we don't have a template in the back of our heads, which just means we have to learn it, because parenting is a skill and skills can be learned. If you liked this video, please hit the subscribe button below so you can be notified of new episodes. And please check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram and Facebook. We are a very supportive community that's a really friendly group of people who are all in this together. You can find us at Dr. Koslowitz Psychology, and check out the Post-Traumatic Parenting podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.